The beautiful section of southern Germany known as Bavaria is known for its fairy tale-like castles and its gorgeous mountain scenery, which seems to be taken right off a Christmas card. Equally stunning are the many ornate little churches dotting the Bavarian countryside and the cities, and nearly all of these house some of the most beautiful religious art in the world. In the 1980s, an Argentinian Jesuit priest named Jorge Bergoglio was doing his doctoral studies in Germany and fell in love with so much of what he saw. In Augsburg, he happened to visit the church of St. Peter am Perlach, where he discovered one of these gems, an obscure Baroque painting made in 1700 by Johann Georg Melchior Schmittner. Like so many devotional art pieces, it depicts Mary, the mother of Jesus. But this painting is quite unique, for in Mary's hands is a knotted white ribbon, which she is calmly untying. Helping her are two angels. One presents the knots of our lives to her, while another angel gives us back the ribbon, now untangled, untied, smoothed out, and freed from all its knots. The painting is known by the rather inelegant German title of Maria Knotenlöserin, Mary, Undoer of Knots. What it represents so touched the heart of this Jesuit priest that it became a favorite source of meditation and prayer for him. Scooping up all the postcards of it he could find, he took them all back to Argentina and would enclose one in every letter he wrote. Due to his influence, the image spread throughout Latin America and has now become the fastest growing Marian devotion in the world, ever since that Jesuit priest was elected Pope. Do you ever feel that your life is hopelessly tied up in all sorts of knots? Do you ever feel so tangled up in those knots that you think there can be no solution, no liberation, no way out of the complex mess that your life has become? You're in good company. From the time that first knot is tied at our birth, everyone's life seems to get more and more complex until it starts looking more like a piece of 70s macrame. We face the knots of confusion and struggle, the knots of conflict and hurt, the knots of anguish, despair, and fear. Problems of every sort come our way, and the unraveling of one only seems to tie a bigger knot someplace else. We retreat from people when they become difficult, and so find ourselves wrapped up in the even more difficult knot of loneliness. We seek to free ourselves from the painful bonds of illness and discover that the net cast over us by the medical system can be even more intolerable. We incur more debt to pay off debts. We get ourselves into commitments impossible to keep. We try to patch things up, only to find that where we cut the patch, there is now an even bigger hole. Knots, knots, and more tangled knots. Is there no way out? Seek the wisdom that will untie your knot, is the great advice of the Sufi mystic Rumi. There is indeed a wisdom that unties, a wisdom that unties by tying. And that is the Christ within us. Lazarus, the one Jesus loved, had bound himself so tightly to the Christ he loved that he could silently cry out from the tomb itself, "Untie me from the bonds of death," and could hear that beloved, that Christ, calling out, "Untie him and let him go." Death, the greatest knot of all, was undone, because an even greater knot had been tied, the knot of love linking the soul to God. Do not fear the knots, even the great ones. Every experience, every challenge, every knot strengthens us and teaches us in the unraveling. How true were the words of American poet Jean Toomer. We learn the rope of life by untying its knots. Inspired by Pope Francis's favorite painting, a Kentucky priest with the curious name of Father Ronnie Knott has written a prayer to the undoer of knots. Dear God, please untie the knots that are in my mind, my heart, and my life. Remove the have-nots, the can-nots, and the do-nots that I have in my mind. Erase the will-nots, may-nots, might-nots that may find a home in my heart. Release me from the could-nots, would-nots, and should-nots that obstruct my life. And most of all, dear God, I ask that you remove from my mind, my heart, and my life all of the am-nots that I have allowed to hold me back, especially the thought that I am not good enough. Amen. And so, beloved Lazarus, living and buried in the soul of each of us, do not be afraid of the knots of life or even the bonds of death, but rather allow God to tie around you one more, the only knot that matters, the only bond that frees, the beautiful, all-encompassing knot of divine love.